If you haven't already, you should watch part 1 of this series about the family, as that video essentially sets the stage and gives you a good picture as to how the family international has an extensively documented past of strange behavior. As we begin to dive into this rabbit hole, I'll be under the assumption that you have already watched part 1. Before anything though, I just want to quickly recap some of the things we were talking about in part 1. The cult's founder was David Berg. The group has gone by various different names such as the Children of God, the Family, and the group still exists today under the name the Family International. They had some strange and fundamentally doctrines and practices such as flirty fishing. Children were exposed to explicit material through the Mo letters and other publications which circulated exclusively throughout the cult and its members. And lastly, we ended off my previous video going over an article by the BBC titled Children of God Cult Jailed for Horrific Offenses, and we're now going to dive back into said article. 2019 was the year Derek Lincoln was arrested. He was extradited from France to Scotland where he faced trial, and on July 13th, 2020 he pled guilty to the rape and assault of 2 underage girls, which took place at various locations between 1989 and 1991. Lincoln had a position of leadership within the family, which is how he had access to children, and he along with the children, parents, and other members all stayed in communes which were in remote locations, making it difficult for detectives to pinpoint their area. For this reason, among others, tracking down Lincoln may have been difficult, but thankfully not impossible, thanks to the many witness testimonies, including that of Hope Bastine. According to an article written by Mike Farrell for the BBC titled Children of God Survivor Wants Justice for Others, Hope had initially reported Lincoln's abuse against her way back in 2004, and of course the info she gave along with the info of other witnesses led to a large-scale investigation spanning the UK, France, and India. Hope Bastine may have first told police what happened to her in 2004, however, that's not when the abuse she endured happened, and to tell that story we'd have to go back to when she was only 4 years old. It was at that age in which she recalls her first memory of being abused by Derek Lincoln, and she said the abuse was consistent and regular. Quote, "The most salient memory of the first abuse is being on the bed furthest away from the door near the farmhouse window. The commune where she and her family lived was at an isolated farmhouse close to Toulouse located in France, with said commune having been led by Lincoln himself. With him in charge of the commune, naturally it would have been his responsibility to make sure everyone's okay. However, unfortunately his concern for the members he was in charge of would merely be an excuse when it came to checking on the younger members. Quote, Lincoln would use the excuse of checking to see if we were asleep. I remember him kneeling by my bed on my left side and touching me intimately. I was in that state where you're falling asleep and I just froze with fear, my toes curling up and my legs stiffening. I knew it was wrong and unpleasant, but I lost my voice. I was trying to open my mouth to scream or to call out, but my voice box wasn't working. Later he held his hand over my mouth." Hope describes Lincoln to have been a dark and looming presence, and she also said for over 12 years she was abused by him almost every week, sometimes even twice a week. The parts I quoted about some of Hope's past experiences came from an article written by Sharon Hendry from The Times, who interviewed Hope, and in said article she recounts a lot more of her experiences in the cult, her family, as well as some of her thoughts and feelings about the Children of God in general and its founder, and I'm now gonna go over some of the most interesting parts. Hope recounts a time when she was 8 years old and lived in India. She moved throughout the country in different communes, and it was during this time of her life in which she describes how she was forced to perform that apparently David Berg himself requested to be recorded and sent to him. And speaking of Berg, Hope talks about him as well and how he and the members of the family perceived him as some sort of end-time prophet. However, she says in reality he was a highly disturbed individual who was an alcoholic on top of having illithric desires. The Mo letters are brought up as well, which was one of Berg's main methods of communication with the members of the family, and apparently over a span of 24 years nearly 3,000 of these letters were published. And if you remember from my previous video, we went over some of the Mo letters where David Berg encouraged women to essentially become and also he believed children and teens should be free to have sex with one another and how it shouldn't be discouraged. I bring this up because Hope expresses how, quote, "We were growing up in a highly environment where adults openly had intercourse in front of us, and play was encouraged among prepubescent youngsters and practiced between adults and children." Lastly, Hope had a brother named Andrew who, like Hope, managed to leave the cult. However, unlike Hope, who ultimately learned to manage and overcome her trauma, Andrew did not, and sadly took his own life in 2004. There's of course more to Hope's story, and I'd recommend you give this article where she's interviewed a read because it gives one of many perspectives of a former cult member, and in her case, seeing how she was able to turn her life around and live normally despite her past trauma, to even playing a pivotal role in putting the man who abused her behind bars is a pretty fascinating and inspiring story. And before we move on to anything else, there's a clip from an interview that I want to show you that was posted on August 25th, 2021 on a YouTube channel called This Morning, where both Hope Bastine and another former member whose name is Verity Carter were interviewed.
But you did, Hope, manage to bring a case against one of the cult members, Derek Lincoln. He abused you for 12 years.
Yes.
And he was jailed last year for 11 and a half years. Did that give you any
closure,
I suppose?
Enormously. It was one of the best days of my life, mostly because, judging by their apology, we're gaslit. No, you didn't experience abuse. That was just our way of life.
If you notice from this clip, Hope brings up an apology made by the family, and I now want to show the part of this interview where said apology was read out loud by their interviewers and in turn responded to by both Hope and Verity.
The organization exists.
Yeah.
Children of God are now known as Family International.
Yeah.
They have a statement, setting out their side of all of this, and they say the Family International has extended open apologies to anyone who was or might have been hurt or harmed in any way during their time residing in family communities, which are likewise extended to Verity and Hope. Although the Family International has apologized for any hurt, real or perceived, that any member or former member may have experienced, we do not give credence to tales of institutionalized abuse. Verity, what do you make of that?
I don't see how they can claim it wasn't institutionalised when they wrote manuals on how to abuse children physically and otherwise as instructions for parents and child raising. It was institutionalised, whatever they say.
And when you talk about abuse against children, how old, how young?
My earliest memories go back to 4 years old for my first incident of abuse that I remember. I don't have many memories before that. The manuals instructed on the abuse of children as young as 2 in some cases. It was severe, and it was not only condoned but actually encouraged as a way to raise their children in God's love.
On June 26, 2018, an article titled Children of God Cult Was Hell on Earth from the BBC was posted, written by Stephen Brocklehurst, and said article details some of Verity Carter's experiences having grown up in the cult. She said from the age of 4 she was abused by members of the family, including her own father, whose name is Alexander Watt, and according to the article, he was convicted after having admitted to abusing Verity. Both her father and mother, quote, claimed to be Christian missionaries as a cover for their activities, and when Verity was about 9 years old, her father left the family. Meanwhile, she and her siblings remained with their mother. Quote, her mother is still an active member of the cult, and Verity no longer speaks with her, but has really good relationships with her 4 brothers and 2 sisters who are outside of the cult. Speaking of Verity's siblings, in yet another article from the BBC written by Mike Farrell, titled The Siblings Who Escaped the Children of God Cult, it covers not only Verity's story, but also that of her younger brother, Jonathan Watt. Quote, Jonathan told the BBC he was not abused, but he was the subject of daily beatings while growing up. He left the group before his sister did, and after him having done so, quote, Verity was told that her brother had been excommunicated for incurable demon possession. According to Jonathan, they tried to pray for the demons to leave him, but it didn't work, and he ultimately was kicked from the family after having a mental breakdown. It was at age 14 when he was excommunicated, and with him being so young, naturally it was a struggle for him to cope and find his footing in life despite finally being free from the cult. I briefly covered an interview along with various articles that documented and shared the stories of 3 victims of the family and their unfortunate past experiences of having been abused as children as a result of growing up in the group. The interview and articles sharing their stories were only recently made, spanning the years 2018 to 2021, and like I mentioned in my last video, this cult has been around for over half a century. My goal with showcasing these recent stories and my reason for going over some of the strangest Mo letters and religious doctrines and practices, Mr. Ward's legal document, and the Larry King interview, all of which dating from the late 60s to mid 90s in my previous video about the Children of God, was to highlight a myriad of examples of the media scrutiny the cult has been under over the years, and also to show you that without a doubt the Family International has a lot of skeletons in their closet, and considering the group is worldwide and has been around for 57 years, there's gotta be so many undocumented instances of abuse and so many members of the family that deserve to be behind bars. We're gonna talk about more instances and allegations of abuse from the past, and in a sec, but before we proceed, I want to head back to the article by the Sunday Times about Hope Bastine, as there's one parallel that I want to draw. In the section where Hope talked about having lived in India, she mentioned, quote, "During this time, I was forced to perform that Berg asked to be videoed and dispatched to him." Her having brought this up reminded me of a video archive I found on a YouTube channel run by X Family, posted all the way back in April of 2007, where multiple women, including David Berg's own granddaughter, Mary Berg, made accusations of abuse, and I'm now gonna let this clip roll out for you.
They'll be now smile children if they put the kids on a show or singing for someone, and they may be beating them and abusing them in the back room like they were to me when I was 9 years old. They were abusing me.
Accusations are one thing, visual proof is another. We have acquired hours of videotape from a disaffected family member. The family claims these tapes were stolen. The tapes are very explicit. We have had to edit them carefully for this report. The tapes bear witness to what Abigail and Mary were talking about. Child abuse, child and using adult female members of the Children of God as lures to get converts. And most frightening, a doctrine of seemingly indiscriminate Miriam Padilla.
Having to have sex with people you don't love, being groped about, or having to, do videos of naked dancing and stuff like that.
Those secret videos were made for David Berg, also known as Moses David. Mary Berg, David Berg's granddaughter, then and now.
I'm going to end the video off here, and in the next installment of this series, we'll be doing a deep dive into Mary Berg's story, as through it, even more sick and twisted things about the family's leadership and members are revealed.